Researchers compared Chinese DNA to every ancient civilization. Only one matched. Somewhere inside a quiet genetics lab, a single strand of ancient DNA sat waiting to answer a question civilizations had asked for centuries. Where did we truly come from? Scientists had spent years collecting genetic samples from remote skeletons, forgotten burial sites, and ancient bones scattered across continents most people will never visit. Then came an experiment few expected. Researchers decided to compare modern Chinese DNA against genetic records from nearly every known ancient civilization on Earth. Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, early European settlers. One by one, each comparison came back with only partial, scattered genetic similarities. But one result stood apart from all the rest, showing a connection so strong that even the scientists paused before publishing their findings. Why would one ancient population, buried thousands of miles and thousands of years away, share such a striking genetic thread with people living today? This question quietly reshaped how researchers understood human migration, ancestry, and the deep biological threads connecting distant, unrelated corners of the ancient world. For decades, historians assumed Chinese civilization developed almost entirely in isolation, shaped only by its own rivers, mountains, and internal cultural evolution. The new DNA evidence challenged that comfortable assumption, hinting at hidden movement, forgotten contact, or shared ancestry no textbook had ever mentioned. Every human being alive today carries invisible genetic messages, quietly written inside their cells, waiting patiently for science to translate them. These messages don't lie, don't forget, and don't care about borders, empires, or the stories nations tell about their own beginnings. That is exactly why this particular DNA match unsettled so many experts who believed China's genetic story was already fully understood. If one ancient civilization really did leave its fingerprint inside modern Chinese DNA, what does that reveal about early human history? Was it trade? Was it migration? Was it something far older, buried deeper in time than written history has ever recorded? To understand this mystery, we must travel back thousands of years, long before dynasties, long before written language, long before recorded memory. We must follow ancient footprints across deserts, rivers, and mountain passes where the first genetic threads of this story were quietly planted. Because somewhere between forgotten migrations and silent bloodlines, science may have finally found a connection historians never dared to imagine. And once you understand which ancient civilization truly matched, you will never look at Chinese ancestry or human history the same way again. What researchers uncovered next didn't just rewrite assumptions about China, it challenged everything we thought we understood about ancient human connection itself. The answer, as we're about to discover, begins not in modern laboratories, but in the dust of a world lost to time. That journey starts thousands of years ago, in landscapes long buried beneath sand, ice, and centuries of forgotten human wandering. A quick note before we continue. This reveal blends established genetic findings with ongoing research, and the full picture is still being uncovered by scientists today. The story begins in the ancient river valleys of East Asia, thousands of years before anyone imagined nations, borders, or written history existed. Along the Yellow River, early farming communities slowly built villages, cultivated millet, and shaped what would eventually become Chinese civilization. But archaeologists studying these early settlements found something strange scattered among ancient tools, pottery, and burial sites across the region. Certain skeletal remains showed physical traits that seemed unusual, hinting at populations who may have arrived from far beyond local river valleys. Thousands of miles west, ancient steppe cultures were expanding across Central Asia, herding animals and slowly migrating through mountain passes and open grasslands. These wandering groups eventually reached the Tarim Basin, a remote desert region now part of modern western China. There, archaeologists uncovered remarkably preserved mummies, buried in dry desert sand for thousands of years, untouched by time itself. Their features surprised researchers immediately, showing characteristics historians did not expect to find so deep inside ancient East Asian territory. Genetic testing on these mummies revealed something remarkable, connecting them distantly to ancient populations who once lived across Siberia and Central Asia. This discovery suggested that ancient migration routes were far more complex than simple isolated development within a single river valley civilization. Trade routes, later known as branches of the ancient Silk Road, may have existed in primitive form long before formal trade networks appeared. Early travelers likely carried more than goods across these paths, unintentionally carrying genetic threads that would echo for thousands of years. Meanwhile, other ancient groups migrated southward from Siberian regions, following resources, climate shifts, and slowly changing environmental conditions across Asia. Historians still debate exactly how these movements unfolded, since ancient peoples left behind bones and tools, but rarely written explanations. What remains clear is that early Chinese civilization did not develop in complete isolation, despite centuries of historical assumption. Instead, evidence increasingly points toward layered migrations, quiet contact, and shared ancestry stretching across vast, seemingly disconnected ancient landscapes. Some researchers propose that ancient North Eurasian populations, existing long before recorded history, contributed genetic material found across multiple later civilizations. If true, this would mean many ancient peoples, separated by thousands of miles, may share a distant, forgotten common ancestral thread. This theory remains actively debated, with new archaeological discoveries occasionally strengthening or complicating the picture scientists have slowly assembled. Still, each new burial site, each preserved skeleton, adds another fragment to an increasingly complex ancient human migration puzzle. The Tarim Basin mummies became one of the strongest physical clues connecting ancient Central Asian ancestry to populations living in China today. But mummies and bones can only reveal so much, since physical appearance alone cannot fully explain deep genetic relationships. To truly understand this ancient connection, scientists needed something far more precise than skeletons, pottery, or preserved desert remains. They needed DNA itself, the invisible code hidden inside every human cell, capable of revealing ancestry no textbook could ever describe. And what modern genetic research eventually uncovered would challenge, refine, and reshape everything historians previously believed about this ancient story. Modern genetics gave scientists a tool ancient historians never had, allowing them to read ancestry directly from human DNA itself. Researchers extracted genetic material from ancient bones, comparing it against thousands of modern DNA samples collected from populations across the entire world. This process, called ancient DNA analysis, allows scientists to trace migration patterns that occurred long before any written record existed. When researchers compared Tarim Basin mummy DNA to worldwide ancient populations, one particular ancestral group produced a surprisingly strong genetic connection. Evidence suggests these mummies carried genetic markers linked to an ancient population known as ancient North Eurasians, a group that once roamed Siberia. This ancient Siberian population is not a nation or civilization in the traditional sense, but a genetic lineage stretching back thousands of years. Scientists believe the same ancient lineage also contributed genetic material to populations later found across Europe, Central Asia, and parts of the Americas. That means the strongest historical match wasn't a famous ancient civilization like Egypt or Mesopotamia, but a much older, less visible ancestral group. Researchers found that modern Chinese populations, particularly in northern and western regions, carry measurable traces of this deep, ancient Siberian ancestry. This finding surprised many scientists, since it suggested shared ancestry stretching across regions once assumed to be genetically and culturally separate. One leading theory proposes that ancient hunter-gatherer groups migrated across Siberia thousands of years ago, gradually splitting into different regional populations. Some of these groups moved westward into Europe, others moved eastward into the Americas, and others moved south into East Asia. If this theory is accurate, it would mean many modern populations across the world share a distant, largely forgotten common ancestral root. However, scientists are careful to clarify that this connection does not mean any single ancient civilization directly created another society. Instead, evidence suggests overlapping migration waves, mixing gradually over thousands of years, rather than one civilization simply becoming another. Current research continues studying additional ancient burial sites, hoping to clarify exactly how these migration waves moved and interacted over time. Some questions remain unresolved, including precisely when certain groups arrived, how quickly they mixed, and how widely this ancestry spread. Scientists also caution against oversimplifying complex genetic data into single dramatic headlines that ancient civilizations were somehow secretly identical to one another. Instead, the honest scientific picture reveals a slow, layered story of migration, contact, isolation, and remixing across thousands of years. This nuance makes the discovery more remarkable, not less, since it reveals how deeply interconnected ancient human populations truly were. The Tarim Basin mummies, once a strange archaeological curiosity, became a genetic bridge connecting seemingly unrelated corners of the ancient world. Their DNA offered a rare physical link between ancient Siberian ancestry and populations who would later become part of Chinese civilization. But why does this ancient genetic connection matter to people living ordinary lives, thousands of years after these migrations occurred? The answer lies not just in ancestry charts or laboratory reports, but in what this discovery reveals about human identity itself. That deeper meaning is where our story finally arrives, connecting ancient bones, modern science, and the shared story of humanity. Every genetic discovery eventually leads back to one simple, powerful truth about human beings and where they truly come from. The ancient DNA connecting Chinese populations to deep Siberian ancestry reveals something far bigger than any single civilization or historical timeline. It shows that human history was never a story of isolated nations, but a story of constant movement, mixing, and shared survival. Long before borders existed, before dynasties rose and fell, ancient people were already walking, migrating, and quietly connecting distant corners of the world. The Tarim Basin mummies, once buried and forgotten beneath desert sand, became silent messengers carrying proof of this ancient human journey. Their DNA did not just answer a scientific question, it revealed a forgotten thread linking ancestors separated by thousands of miles and years. This discovery challenges the idea that any civilization developed completely alone, untouched by outside contact, migration, or shared human ancestry. Instead, it suggests that ancient Siberian hunter-gatherers left genetic echoes scattered across continents, quietly shaping populations who never knew this shared history existed. Modern Chinese ancestry, much like many populations worldwide, carries fragments of this deep, ancient story written invisibly inside human DNA. Scientists emphasize that this connection does not erase cultural identity, but instead adds another layer to humanity's much older, shared biological story. Understanding this matters today because it reminds us how deeply connected human populations have always been, despite appearing culturally distinct. Genetic research like this quietly dismantles old assumptions that ancient civilizations developed in complete isolation from the rest of the world. Instead, evidence increasingly shows overlapping waves of migration, gradual mixing, and shared ancestral roots, stretching far deeper than most people realize. This is why scientists continue studying ancient burial sites, hoping to uncover additional pieces of this vast, unfinished human migration puzzle. Every new discovery adds nuance, correcting oversimplified stories while revealing a far more intricate, interconnected picture of ancient human movement. The story of Chinese DNA matching ancient Siberian ancestry is not a story of one civilization replacing another, but of quiet, ancient connection. It reminds us that identity, ancestry, and history are far more complex than simple maps, borders, or traditional historical narratives suggest. Beneath modern nations and cultural identities lies a shared ancient story written silently inside DNA long before anyone could read it. This is the quiet power of genetic science, uncovering forgotten human connections that history books alone could never fully explain. The ancient wanderers of Siberia never knew their journey would one day be traced through invisible code inside human cells. Yet their movement across frozen landscapes thousands of years ago still echoes quietly inside people living ordinary lives today. This discovery leaves us with a powerful reminder that human history is one long, unfinished story, still being uncovered fragment by fragment. Perhaps the deepest lesson from this ancient DNA match is simple. Humanity was never as separated as we once believed ourselves to be. Somewhere in your own ancestry, ancient migrations may still be quietly written, waiting for science to one day help reveal that story too. If this journey into ancient DNA and forgotten migration fascinated you, subscribe for more hidden stories written deep inside human history.